go?
I
Do you
do.
have them there? Excellent,
Yeah.
good.
Trying not to eat them.
Welcome, and if you're just joining, you can write in the chat where you are. We're so happy everyone's here. We're just going to give a few more minutes to gather virtually.
That's so cool, from Finland.
Yeah. Hi, Amanda.
I suppose I can unleash the curls. This is for my consumption.
Recording in progress.
Cal, where in Connecticut are you?
Ellie, I just turned that off.
Perfect. Okay.
It's funny having a a Facebook Instagram relationship with people, because like I see Ali Berlo as someone I follow, and now I'm trying to find her so I can say hi to her. But maybe she's not visual. Anyway,
No.
hi.
But she
Hi.
just signed in from Putney, Vermont.
Yeah. Wow, lots of people.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we had 60 people sign up. So it's a good crowd. Ooh, Alison, you're muted.
I am, you're right. I was just
There.
going to say to Annie that if you go to the bottom, you should see a button that says participants. If you click on that, you can see the names of everyone, so you can find
Oh, wow.
your friend on there and send her a message.
Directly.
Okay. Alison, you're a whiz. Because you do your podcast, and that's so good.
Thank you. That has been a technical challenge and many lessons this year, for sure.
Well, it sounds very professional from a my point of view.
Thank you. Thank you. It's fun. That's why I do it, because it's fun, really.
What is your
And
podcast? I don't know it.
I have a podcast that I do with another Instagram friend in Washington State. It's just called Ancestral Kitchen Podcast. We've been going almost a year now, and just done our last episode for this year. Looking forward to doing lots more next year. And it's been such fun. My husband does the tech, which makes a huge difference, because he's got my back and he knows what he's doing, whereas we don't really know what we're doing, and that helps tremendously.
That's wonderful. Alison, in the chat, would you put just the name of it so people can see the words? And I'm gonna say that Ali Berlo has a podcast as well. Ali, would you write the name or say the name of your podcast? Because I forget.
Yeah, it's What is American Food? And I'll put the website into the chat.
Awesome.
Great, thank you. And if anybody else is involved with a podcast, please go ahead and share. It's such a wonderful way to connect. I want to recommend Mark Dick's podcast, Rise Up. That's where you can find lots and lots of bread people. And another one that I love, well, geez. Okay, I have no memory anymore. Not sure what it is that I wanted to say to you, but trust me, I had a good impulse. Yeah. But Rise Up is the baker's podcast. That's fun.
I really like Julie Smith's podcast, Cooking the Books, which is just basically all about cookbooks. And she interviews someone every week.
Yeah, that's great. And also in cookbooks, there's a great newsletter called Stained Page News that is super fun. And sometimes they do historical cookbook stuff. Newsletters and podcasts and Instagram
Excellent.
friendships. That's what this life is now. Okay, we are at 8:05. I don't know how religious you all want to be about time, but Annie, do you wanna start?
Yeah.
Or
Just to say hi to Ali Berlo, who I can't see, and I can't figure out how to direct message. Hi Ali. Hi everybody. This is fun. I think it's all women. Is that true? So that's interesting. So I think this started because Alison and Ellie, and Amy had a role too, but I don't know what it was, got inspired to make fermented gingerbread based on the rough directions that are on the Sandy's Wild Fermentation website, like that good old fashioned website. There's a kind of historic German recipe that is posted there. And I had kind of posted about it myself. And so you all honored me by including me, and I'm really happy to be here. So I'm just going to talk about what I have learned doing gingerbread a couple of times through the years. So, and I wrote something that is in the show notes. Several years ago, I just set out to kind of make cookies with that method. And I did it with lots of fun flours like buckwheat and rye and I think chestnut flour. And, I'm getting my voice back at me. How can I stop that?
You only have that. Maybe we can make sure everybody is muted who's not presenting, and maybe that will help. So if you can make sure you're muted.
Well, okay. What I'm going to do is just put my fingers in my ears.
Amy, can you mute people, being the leader of the
I'm going to try that.
Are you able to mute people?
I forget where that little...
Because I can see some people aren't muted.
It stopped. Yeah. It stopped.
Okay.
Oh, good. Thank you all.
It's its own hell having to hear yourself.
That's a great idea, Amanda.
So okay. I've made cookies, for Christmas, actually for a bake sale kind of thing, with different flours and shapes. And they were so nice. They were so not aggressively sweet and they just tasted really old fashioned, whatever that meant. They didn't taste like anything I'd had before. So I got really interested and then, forget about it for most of the year. But this year I decided to do it again. And I feel like this is what I learned from having done it, that flour and sweetener is not just a way to start bread, but it's also a really great way to start cakes and biscuits and cookies and a whole array of things. And it seems like a really maybe obvious thing to say, but it woke up my mind to baking because I'm really trying to bake in a way that's not recipe bound. that's more ingredient bound and inspiration bound and creative. So, okay, I'm hearing the reverb again, so I'm just going to stick my fingers in my ears. And then the other lesson I learned was that the equal proportions of sweetener, honey,
Annie, I just muted you too. Can you unmute yourself?
oh, sorry. What had I said last?
You said that the capital of Italy is Rome.
Okay.
I have no idea.
Was I going on and on? Well, listen, I'll just say that I really enjoy cooking with, no. Okay, this is what I'm gonna do. Can you hear me now? Just nod. Okay, my volume is down. Okay, I really enjoy having that bowl of fermented dough, though is it fermented? Because I find the sweetness level is really perfect. The equal parts honey and flour really suits my level of taste for sugar, where modern recipes are often way too sweet. And then when I've tried to kind of reduce the sweetness, then the sugar has also a volume component to play in the recipe, and that can go wrong. So I learned that. And I really enjoy like the creativity that of just having a bowl of sweetened dough. Like it was really fun for me. So the three things that I did, which I put on my Instagram, I made these, so these are just my, can you see? The kind of star, just very traditional looking biscuits, but I flavored them with these this amazing spice combination that's in a book I have called, in a recipe for turmeric cake, in a Syrian book called Syria Recipes from Home. And it's anise, cinnamon, turmeric, and nigella seeds, meaning onion seeds, which are kind of like an intense, weird kick, but they're so delicious actually in that cake, and actually as well in these biscuits. So that was just my fun little thing to try because I just wanted to. And then I also put the same combination in the icing sugar, in the confectioner's sugar royal icing on the top, and it just seemed fun. So they're a little bit savory, and these biscuits are not too sweet, and that was really fun. And then I also tried a recipe for an old-fashioned French gingerbread called nonette de rime, but something went wrong. I didn't mix the egg in well enough, and then I had to leave the house, and I just had this batter. So then, as I describe in the program notes, I got kind of turned off of the idea of continuing to make them, and I wanted to make gingerbread, fermented gingerbread biscotti, because biscotti are a great thing to make when you have dough that's gone wrong. As I realized with that underbaked cake last summer, I underbaked the cake and then tried to form it again, bake it in the oven, and it just was horrible as a cake, but the kind of slightly crispied outside edges tasted like biscotti. And I realized that biscotti just is like a twice baked dough by, bas cotti, meaning cooked. And it was such a kind of, rather than seeing biscotti as this like fixed and codified, Italian biscuit that you might eat in like a coffee shop. It's actually like something people have made and used and been creative with, and there's a lot of like fluidity and continuum in bakes and stuff, and that's kind of interesting for me, and it's how I think about my cooking and my baking. So I made those biscotti, which are really, really good, and also a really good level of sweetness, and not too sweet, and really crunchy, and get really nice when you dip them in black coffee, and a perfect use for that fermented gingerbread dough. So that's what I did. And now I'm just really looking forward to hearing what everyone else has done in our bake-a-thon.
Can you
Okay.
show us the biscotti,
everyone.
Annie?
Sorry?
Can you show us the biscotti, or have you eaten
Oh,
them
did
all?
I not show it? Okay.
Maybe I
here's
looked
one.
away.
Oh. They really they're like slices of a loaf baked again, is what they are.
They're gorgeous.
When you make the to make biscotti, probably many of you have, you kind of form a loaf of the dough, and then when it's semi-cooked, you slice it, and then you bake the slices, and that's how they get their crunchy crispiness. That's the twice cooked. So yeah, they're really good. I added, cranberries and almonds and walnuts and some nice Christmassy spices.
I just have to jump in and say, Annie, that I think I'm going to have a reverb here. I think I'm the guilty.
Okay.
No, Ellie, it's fine as is.
It is okay? Okay.
Yes.
So what I wanted to say is that I just love what you just said about the food that just transforms in a kitchen, right? And this idea of, you and I talked about this a lot, just shedding the perfection and really just being open to what the food can become in our kitchens and let these ingredients speak. And it's such a beautiful, well, from the zero waste point of view. And, and Marie, if she's here, she can talk a lot about that. But it's this idea that, we have these ingredients. And sometimes if we just tune in to them a little bit, they will reveal, right, different ways of using. And to me, that is the perfect food. And I use that word very, very sparingly.
Yeah, I love that. You're like a voice for that. It's like your thing, actually, but I love it too. It takes, it takes a certain amount of confidence because, I recognize that because I'm an experienced cook, like I'm older now, I've been doing this for so long, I can see the direction that things can go, but it's still like something to teach for people to aspire to when they're just beginning to learn to cook, I think, or bake.
Yes, and I think these kinds of recipes, what we have here, this idea of a ratio, and that's why I got so excited, because it's just such a wonderful starting point. And it's like a canvas, right? So here we have a ratio. It just says sweetener that you have, flour that you have, and it really invites us in. It is intimidating. And I will talk, when it's my turn, I'll talk a little bit about some of the things that I had to do that were very frightening when I was going through the recipe. But I think it's such a good opportunity for us to just say, you know what, I'm just going to take a step towards it and have also, our expectations in check. That's not going to be perfect, but the learning is fabulous. And I learned so much from what you just said about the biscotti and the different spices. And so I think coming together then and sharing our failures. It's perfect.
Yeah, definitely. Because the failures are not failures. And the perfection is, I feel like, Instagram just encourages this kind of, while there's like loads of sharing, it also encourages so much surface. And it's not how people are really eating. And it's not, yeah. I don't want to go off on a tangent too much. Yeah, anyway.
I think that it's quite important to say that failures are the only way that you learn how to succeed and how to move forward, because if you made everything kind of just okay, you wouldn't really learn anything and you wouldn't improve as a cook. So although failures are quite sometimes hard to handle when you've put a lot of effort into them, really, just as in life, in cooking, it's the same. It's the failures that make you and change you and make you who you are, really.
Oh yeah.
We know them.
So Alison, will you share some of your findings and experiences?
Yeah.
You've been busy in cooking at home.
I have. I did the kind of cookies once, but I did a spice bread twice, or 3 or 4 times. I'm going to start with the cookies, I think. And first of all, I'll just show you one of my finished ones, which is here. So this is a kind of a Lebkuchen style cookie. I'll say style, you'll find out later how I kind of did it differently. And I've topped this one with some homemade 100% cacao chocolate, which I make from beans here and a little bit of orange. And when I kind of approached this and started doing some research, it became clear to me that spiced honeyed cookies have been made all over the world for many, many, many centuries. And there are thousands of recipes. There are hundreds online. There are probably thousands of recipes for how to create them. And the research that I did kind of led back to China. And there's a Chinese honey bread called Mekong. I don't know how you pronounce it, but it looks like Mekong. And the history books kind of say that it was brought back to Europe via the Crusades, and then it was handed through the monasteries and various other places and became a different type of thing in lots of different places. Also, there's research saying that the Egyptians used spiced honey cake, and we know the Egyptians, did things really, really well. So they've got a tradition as well. Honey was particularly favoured because it was thought of as magical, because it was so sweet, and sweetness really wasn't around in the past like it is now, and also because of its healing powers. I mean, all of us know how honey is an antibacterial, everything, and really, really good for you. And what things like Manuka honey actually are used as medicine. So honey was treated as something really quite special, and therefore these cookies or breads were something special because honey was an expensive ingredient, a magical ingredient, and a healthy ingredient. So to make these cookies, they were kind of based on the Lebkuchen, but when I started researching Lebkuchen, what I found out was there are hundreds of recipes for Lebkuchen as well. And some of them have eggs, some of them are glazed, some of them are thin, some of them are thick, some of them have nuts, some of them are basically all nuts and fruit with just a bit of flour to bind them. And so really it seems like it's a free-for-all, do what suits you. That's what I took it. Do what you want to do what you want to eat. And from my perspective, my son doesn't eat eggs. And so I was just like, right, I don't want to put eggs in. And I saw that on the recipe on the Sandor site said these older style raising agents, and I didn't want to get into trying finding those. So I just used baking powder, which is the kind of the double one that's got the acid and the catalyst in it. And I also didn't want to put any dairy in because I'm not sure whether my son's got a dairy issue. So I just wanted to keep them eggs and dairy free. So what I did, I'll bring my dough in here and kind of show you. I think I can move this down and show you the dough. So my dough was spelt flour because I absolutely love spelt, and it's grown here locally. And I mixed it up with honey, chestnut honey, because that's a local honey that's very prevalent here. Chestnuts are grown in the region that I'm in, and chestnut honey is everywhere. So, and chestnut honey, if you ever get to taste this chestnut honey and you haven't, try to, because it's so beautiful. It's dark, it's such an intense flavour, and it goes really well with the spelt. So I popped those two together and left those. And we'll put the handout that Annie referred to is where we've written up what we've done, each of us, and it's got all of the details in there. So everything that I'll show you for this and my bread, you don't need to worry about writing it down because the details are in the handout. So this is 250 grams of dough. And I just wanted to keep it as simple as possible. No eggs, no dairy, just as simple as possible as I could to actually make a dough. So I've pre-prepared my spices here. These are my spices. And I've got in here cloves, cinnamon, allspice, nutmeg, anise, ginger. I also put my baking powder in here and a bit of salt. I like to use most of my spices whole and grind them in a coffee grinder, because then I can keep them for longer, but also they taste better. So this is the spices that I'm going to put with this amount of dough. Again, the details are in my handout. And then I did one recipe with no fat, one attempt with no fat, and one attempt with fat. And I tasted, or I didn't taste them actually. My partner tasted them, and my son tasted them on different days to see which ones we preferred. And definitely, we all agreed that the ones with the fat were nicer, in that they were less ridiculously hard at the beginning, and they were less kind of dusty, and they held together better. So because I didn't want to use dairy, I'm using lard, which is from local pigs that I rendered myself. I'm just going to take my watch off, and I'm going to actually mix this so you can see it, because it's really simple, basically. I'm going to stand up and put the camera down, and then hopefully, if I swap to this other camera, I can see if you can see me, hopefully. There we go. Okay, move my pad out of the way. So this is my spelt and honey here, and I'm just going to flatten it out. It is sticky. It really is sticky, but it worked. And I'll show you just very briefly how I roll it. So that's my dough, and I'm just sprinkling on all the spices that I ground, and my baking powder and my salt is in there. And then this is my lard. That's going in. And then all I needed to do when I did this last time was put a tiny bit of water in it, and I was able to just work it with my hands and make a pliable dough. What I tend to do first is not bother about the water, because if I put too much water in, it's not salvageable very easily, because I don't want to put extra flour in. But if I need some water in a minute, I shall put it in. And I'm just getting my hands really messy and working it round. It's really interesting to hear Annie say that, one, she used turmeric, because I love turmeric. Yeah, lardy cake, you're right. I love turmeric, but I never would have thought of putting it in this, because I tend to think of turmeric as a savoury spice. And also the nigella seeds. I absolutely adore nigella seeds, and I use them in dressings, I use them in rice, I use them in bread, I use them in cooking lentils. I love their flavour, but I would never have thought of putting them in a cookie. So I'm actually interested, Annie, if you have the chance, what does the nigella taste like in the cookie?
Well, can you hear me? It tastes.
Yeah, I can.
It tastes a little bit acidic and kind of it's like kind of mysterious. Like, what is that taste? I wonder how I could give you all the recipe for the turmeric cake in that book, because that's an incredible combination of flavors. Also with almonds, I think. Yeah, I think it's like it's almost like you can't place something in the onion family if it's not savory. That's what I'd say about the nigella seeds.
Thank you. I'm seeing a couple of comments come up about the dough being hard. So when I took this out of my stash that was had been fermenting for 2 months, it was really hard. And you can see I've literally been doing this to it for about a minute now. There is the option of taking your hard dough and putting it in a bowl of water above a bowl above a simmering saucepan of water. So like a bain-marie. And that makes this much softer. And then you can work it. What I would say is to be careful if you do that, because if it gets too hot, it goes kind of into just a cake batter. And then it's hard to work it into a position where you can roll it. So you could heat it very lightly to make it softer. But the heat of my hands and this lard, this is a workable dough now.
Well, I overheated, and that was my problem with the no nets, by the way,
Ah,
because I did use the bain marie approach.
and what
This is
happened when
really
you
fun to
overheated
watch.
it, Annie?
It kind of it got too battery, and also it was so sticky. I didn't know what to do with it, and then some of the flour actually congealed in a funny way.
Yeah, that's kind of what happened when I tried. I tried heating some for the second recipe that I'm going to show. And it just got really incredibly sticky, and it was sticking onto all the spoons and everything else. And I really didn't know what to do with it. So that's just be careful. That's what I said. Okay, so I'm going to flour my board now. Sometimes with gingerbread, I roll it out between two pieces of greaseproof paper. And I was ready to do that with this because I thought that would be necessary, because usually it sticks. But I found when I made these last week that I really didn't need to, as long as I floured my board and I floured my pin. So I'm flouring the board now with the same spelt flour that is in the dough. And then I'm just flouring my pin a bit as well.
Alison,
So
what is grease-proof paper? Is that wax paper or parchment or something
parchment
else?
in the States. I think it's parchment in the States.
Thank you.
Sorry, we call it greaseproofing. Oh,
yeah,
no, Annie.
it's something in between wax paper and parchment paper.
Thank you.
It's not waxy, like, but it's like it has a coating that you don't want to actually heat necessarily. Well, some people don't like to heat it.
Okay.
There's no wax
So
paper in the UK.
No, that's true. I really struggled to find wax paper here in Italy. I had to go and order it online because I couldn't find wax paper here. Okay, so I'm just rolling it out, and it's very, I try and look, you can kind of see there what sort of thickness it is. I'd say that's maybe 3 millimeters, 4 millimeters. Dust off some of the flour. And I've got a little girly, a little gingerbread girly. And I've got a more boring circle as well. Now I'll do a couple of gingerbread girlies. And of course, as we know, it's best to just get them as tightly in as possible so that you have less dough to roll up and roll again. What I found with the dough being sticky is if you find it's too much like that, you can put it in the fridge for an hour or so, covered, and it will make it more workable. So if it's sticking to things, you have the option of doing that as well. But you can see that just with the flour here on my board, it's not sticking at all. So there we go. So what I'm going to do with these is I'm going to put them on a baking sheet that I know I don't need to grease them because I know my baking sheet's fine. And then I'm going to pop them in the oven at 180 C, which maybe someone can translate into F for me because I'm a centigrade part of the world. And I'm going to cook them probably for 8 to 10 minutes. And what I've noticed is you should take them out before they start to look brown, otherwise they will burn. Really watch them carefully because they go from cooked to burnt extremely quickly. If you've got an oven that's got one bit that's warmer than another, try to turn your tray round halfway. And what you'll find is if you do a recipe like this with no eggs and no dairy, you'll have a cookie that at the beginning of the period is really snappy. So this, when I originally made it, would have snapped really like a ginger snap in the UK. But if you leave it, this has been left in the fridge for a few days, if you leave it in a fridge or in a tin, it will get softer and softer. And that's what I've learned the Lebkuchen do. So don't be deterred if you cook yours and you think, oh my gosh, my teeth are going to break, because if you leave it a couple of days, it will get softer.
Allie?
Okay. Yeah.
Allie, for 300 grams of flour and 300 grams of sweetener, how much fat would you use gram-wise?
So this recipe is 250 grams, and I use 16 grams of lard. Okay. So if you can work it up from that, It's not that much, but yeah, it just, it gives it it makes it softer and not so ridiculously hard. And the flavour is nicer because obviously fat brings out flavour in everything. So that little bit of lard in there, and you can't taste that it's lard. You know, obviously if you want to use butter, but you can't taste a lardy flavour in it. It's just like lardy cakes. You can't taste the lard.
Okay, and the 180 Celsius is 356 Fahrenheit.
Thank you. Okay, I'll leave that there and hand over to Ellie for a little while I get these on a baking tray. She can show you something her end, and then we'll come back to me.
I'm going to unmute myself. So, Alison, that was great. It's great because you already gave the introduction to some of the things I want to just talk about. So I'm just going to go right into the recipe. So my explorations were around this idea of the different cookies and how the different cultures expressing themselves, and how these recipes actually just travel, and how humans here would just, you know, look at honey and we look at grains and we're like, you know, they should be together, and people just mixing things up, but they also travel, and of course the spices that, you know, were a big drive between countries. But I started so first I'm going to talk about a Russian cookie, pryaniki. And my husband is ethically Russian, and so he was able to help me look up some of these recipes because I don't speak Russian. And I've been making pryaniki since the summertime, and it is 100% rye cookie. And I remember some of the recipes will say things like, well, after you mix, leave it out. Didn't say for how long or anything like that. So I kind of banked that information. So when Annie started talking about the gingerbread cookies and the dough that's set for 2 months, and I was like, oh, that sounds so much like pryaniki, but they're not leaving out for that long, but okay, another banked information. So then when I started reading about the gingerbread recipe, I realized that, you know, similar spices, just really, really, really mirroring the conversation of what they were doing in Germany. So I'm not sure all the history, and I actually, in my handout, I have some links. We're going to provide a handout for everybody with our exploration. So there'll be recipes there, photos, and some links. And I link to some of the places that I visit and some of the information, and you guys can, you know, go in and just kind of nerd out about all this. But my exploration with the pryaniki, it was to figure it out, were the Russians' older recipes also fermenting for a longer time? And I don't know if Sharon is here online with us today, but she had sent me a message about the recipe that she was doing that mixed everything together. And then you put it away, including the raw egg. So that just sent me in a spin, because I was like, oh, great. So not only now I am, you know, fermenting my flour with honey and leaving it in my basement for 3 months, but the people are actually putting the raw egg in there, you know, with their living, and just, you know, putting away. So I asked my husband to help me look for some keywords and try to find some recipes. And sure enough, pryanikis are just like gingerbread. Every person will make their own, and they make with pumpkin, and they make with, you know, different kinds of winter squash, and they put things in them, and they put seeds in them, and whatever flour they have, and they're just so many expressions. And so this particular one that we're able to find is actually a fermented one, and it uses, and that's what I'm going to show you guys today, and it uses sour cream, but I'm going to use milk kefir. It does have an egg, so I add the egg. And then I had this whole conversation with Amy about the baking powder and the baking soda, because I was afraid if I added the baking soda with the milk kefir, it would just become a little volcano experiment. So I went with the baking powder instead of the baking soda. I mixed everything. I let it sit, all the raw things in my counter, and I fed to my family and told them, you may make your wishes right now, because this is the cookie that you may die from. And they didn't die, even though my daughter was like very Shakespearean. She was like, and with this bite, I may die. But then she, acted out, tossed herself on the floor, and then came back and said, well, the cookie was so good, I came back from heaven. So we didn't die. The raw eggs sat in the batter. But I just have to do a little disclaimer. We do have our own chickens. So we got these fresh eggs, from our chickens. So if you do try this, I think there's some things that we probably should keep in mind, eggs that you know where they come from, perhaps is a safer idea. In my case, I use milk kefir and is also a fermenting device. Anyway, so I'm happy to show you this. I can move to the other camera. And also, so some of the old recipes, the Russian recipes, it encourages also a different method to soften the dough. Pryaniki is often, you will see some versions that will say, well, you can use whole wheat, but really it wants rye. It was designed to be made with rye. Historically, it's a rye cookie. You can use whatever you like, of course, but if you want to approximate that flavor, I would encourage you to start with rye if you can. And we are lucky here in Maine, we have a fabulous Maine grains rye, and I actually use the rye meal for this. So it's just, very, very delicious. But it's very sticky and it's very stiffy. And I think one of the things to keep in mind is you can let it warm at room temperature. Some of the Russian recipes says actually put the bowl in a bain-marie underneath the pot with a little bit of water and turn the heater off and just let it sit for a little bit. That is just perhaps just enough to soften the dough. But I'll move on to this side if it's okay. I don't know, Amy, can we see this?
I have to figure it out, Ellie. I'm having a hard time getting back to everybody.
It's okay. I can probably try to bring my computer over.
No. There it is.
Yeah. Can you hear me though?
Yeah.
No echo?
No echo.
Oh, I'm outdoing myself here.
There you are.
Okay, so first, let me show you. This is the cookie.
That the raw cookie, Ellie?
No, this is the
cooked
cookie. This is what we're aiming for.
Okay.
And this is what they look inside. They're absolutely to die for. This other one, I actually added a little surprise. You can put, traditionally, people would put jam, or I put like orange inside. This one has poppy seeds and orange zest. So here we are. So I am using my fermented dough today, but the original recipe would have said mix everything and let it sit out. So I'm just kind of following the process that we have adopted for this get together. And the interesting thing is the original recipe for the pryaniki, it does keep the ratio of 1:1. So it's really wonderful to see how the different cultures are really doing this with a purpose. So it makes us feel more confident as well as we learn about other cultures and what they're doing and see. And that's like a source of how I personally gain some information and confidence is trying to read how other people approach things and just kind of try to have that conversation on my head. All right, so I'm gonna add all the ingredients, and in my case, I will start with the wet ones to help soften the dough. So I'm gonna do 1 egg, and I'm gonna do some milk kefir. You could do sour cream. Now, with liquid, I always do this. I always add a little bit less than what any recipe says, because it may be humid, maybe my flour is different. So I just, at some point, I'm like, okay, I can always add. It's exactly what Alison was saying, right? You just go slowly with your liquid. And if you need more, you can always add more. In the case of the fermented flour, I may not have extra fermented flour, or my egg may be too big. So mix this. I'm mixing this with my left hand, which usually I would mix with my right hand, but I'm trying to keep my right hand clean in case I have to reach for my computer. It looks nice and messy, and it smells incredible. And we're going to add about 4 tablespoons of butter. That's about 2. And also, if you guys met me on Instagram, you probably know a little bit about the things I talk, my upbringing, my mom's kitchen. My mom never had a cookbook. And she had a notebook with recipes from friends. And the recipes would say things like, add flour until just right, add an egg. If you don't have an egg, add some squash, or if you don't have a squash. And so it just use what you have, basically. And the temperatures to bake would be like bake at bread temperature, bake at cake temperature. And so it was always very interesting when I started cooking and trying to make some of the recipes from my family, and I'll be like, there's just no way I can cook anything. But you just try and you fail, and then you adjust the temperature and you realize how your oven works. And okay, so here it is. So I feel a few knobs, so I'm still working through it. So anybody have any questions? Maybe they can type in a chat, and somebody can read it to me, and I'm happy to answer them if I can.
Ellie, that looks awfully moist.
Yes.
Will you be adding more flour? How do you?
I'm not done yet. I'm gonna add. So here's my spice, and here's my baking leaven. Yes, and it feels wet, but this dough, it's a very soft dough. And I was also skeptical when I first mixed, but you have to refrigerate, and then you make the balls with wet hands. And that's how come you get the cookie that is very spongy. You get this cookie that it's almost like a cookie wannabe scone. It's really lovely. It's like a portable little cake, but it won't crumble. It's really, really nice texture. And then when it's chilled, this is what I have in my fridge. You see, it's very, even when it's cold, it's pretty wet. Can you see?
Okay. Yeah. What's that little white part, or is that just the bottom of the bowl?
Which white part?
Oh, it is just the bottom of the bowl. Never mind.
Oh, sorry, the reflection.
Yeah. So someone's asking about the ratio of leavening. These will be getting all of these to you, the proportion, but Ellie, how much do you want to say how much leavening?
Sure. So here we have 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I like to use coarse salt because I love finding little crystals in my cookies. So I do half a teaspoon of coarse salt. I think if you're using fine salt, I would reduce that. You use 2 teaspoons of baking powder. And again, I'm kind of going by sort of like old school, 1 teaspoon of baking powder for a cup of flour. Maybe with some experimentation, you would find that you could use more or less, depending on your flour.
And then Annie's asking if you'd ever use these with sourdough rather than chemical leavening.
No, but that is definitely the next step. I would love to. Oh, so one little fun thing, the milk kefir, I was hoping that would be acting as a sourdough starter here, because I have done a lot of recipes using milk kefir to rice bread. So I was hoping that the milk kefir would create that environment with the yeast and bacteria.
Right, that activity.
And so you see, as we mix, it sort of like starts hydrating and it's less sticky. I'm going to wash my hands for a second, and I'll show you what it looks like when we handle with wet hands. So now my hands are wet, and you can actually, form a little ball. You can stuff some things in it. And now, but this is not done. I still need to add my poppy seed. And you can add some almond flour if you like. Really, they encourage you to just load with all the good stuff. So I'm going to add some orange peel. This is from a food rescue from last year. I had a friend who gave us a box of beautiful going bad oranges from one of her pickups. And they were organic oranges. Of course, I could never toss it. So I spent like 5 days preserving all the orange peels. And now this is the most amazing gift because I have this beautiful, oranges to add. So we're gonna add all of that.
That is a lot of orange peel.
Yes, but it's amazing how these cookies absorb all these flavors. And it's just, and then I know it sounds crazy, but more orange zest. And I'm gonna get my poppy seed. I'm sorry for my screen absence.
That's okay. Tell me if the one that you sent me, Ellie sent me a box of cookies that I greedily ate and didn't share a single one with my family. But the one that you sent, did that have poppy seeds and orange in it, Ellie?
No, that one, I think maybe you got the one that had guava.
Yes.
But it did not have poppy seed. Which means that I may have to send you a new one.
I think so.
So, so this is this picture right here is an ode to my friend Diana. I don't know if she's online right now, but she's been also playing with poppy seed and orange. And every time now I look at a bowl that has this combination, I think of her, but I don't even want to bake this. I just want to make this into a salad and just eat it. I'm just saying, this is how my brain works, right? So I'm like looking at this and I'm like, oh, okay, so if these were steamed berries tossed with orange zest and poppy seed, I would lightly put some olive oil and maybe some almonds and maybe some kale, and I would have a great salad. So have fun with all your recipes. It's when we have a little quiet time and moment, we learn so much from ingredients.
It's so great to think about. And you're reminding me that orange poppy seed pound cake is a pretty common combination. Where did you first come up with this orange poppy idea?
So believe it or not, the recipe that Dimitri found just had a list of things. It said, put poppy seed in and citrus or whatever you have. And I am aware of, poppy seed lemon that I love very much. And I just said, okay, I'm going to go for it. And I have not regretted. Now, do you see how much the dough has been hydrating? Sorry, my English here. And now I can actually, form a lovely little ball. And once it chills, it's going to be even easier. Another option is you could also chill, scoop it up some balls, freeze it, ready to go. So I think that's my demo. Oh, I can go to the other camera now and I can show you the cookies that I have on this side.
There we are.
Here we are. So here is the prяники, and this one was made with milk kefir and the egg, and my family did not die, and I'll eat it just in case. It's really soft. It's full of flavor, orange and poppy, and I just hope you'll try. It's so good. If you don't have a milk kefir, you can use sour cream. You can probably reduce the liquid in the recipe and do some buttermilk. This is the cookie that started all. In the summertime, I started making prяники and learning about it. And I just love the idea of this cookie that is spice and is given as a gift throughout the year. So it doesn't have a date, right? It's like all the time. Gifts of cookie year round, the same cookie. But also people put things inside. So for this one, I also put a layer. This one has orange as well. And often you put guava or whatever you like. And it's a wonderful cookie to be shared and you just bring to the table.
Let's say a little bit more about whatever you'd like though. I mean, I'm thinking I have grape conserve. I could put that in there. Like I said, anything, does it need to be really stiff or could you have something a little bit squishy like an apple butter or?
Yes, so hold on a second.
Of course. This cookie is really, really very, very good. It's so much my favorite now.
This cookie is not on the handout because this huge one, it's not fermented, but I will add to the handout. Because I think you can make this with the 1-to-1 fermented dough. Mm-hmm. Just do not add the milk kefir. So you can have a dough that can be pressed. Does it make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So here's, for example, an example of my husband had saw this quince tree in a parking lot and he brought me some quince and I made a little bit of jam. So I think as long as you have a feeling that you can kind of hold together, it would be good for stuffing your prяники. It's like as long as, if it is too runny, like if it is a very runny jam or let me think of jelly, like if that has a jelly consistency, it will probably melt in the dough when it bakes. So you want something that has a little bit higher sugar content or that has plenty of pectin that will hold together. So if you want to use apples, I would reduce the applesauce to become a little bit of an apple butter, or you add a little bit more sugar to your applesauce and cook that down. Jams, I think it would work well. I think the jelly maybe just a little bit too runny.
And you used chocolate, didn't you, once?
I did, yes. That's excellent. So thank you for reminding me of that. Yes, you can just use little, chocolate bars. You can put little chocolate in there. Definitely pumpkin paste. We make a lot of pumpkin treats here because we grow squash. So we're eating a lot of squash. So squash everything. So make some pumpkin squash butter and, put in your crock pot and let it reduce to become this nice thick paste. Does it help? Your question, Amy? Does it address your question?
Yes, that's great. And people want to know about your orange preservation too, the candied orange. Yeah.
Sure. So I slice, because these were rescue oranges, so they're not very pretty. So they don't, it's whatever I could cut around the oranges. So, but you can, make strips, or you can candy large ones. And it's just a ratio of putting them in a syrup water. In Brazil, we like to do a rinse, where you bring them to a boil in water, and then you strain it, and then you put in the syrup. But to be sincere with you, I don't do that step. I just cook them because I don't mind the bitterness. And I know people are sensitive to the potential bitterness of the orange skin. So if that's an issue. But Anne-Marie has a great recipe on her website, the Zero Waste Chef. I don't know if she's here with us today. She can talk about her process. I don't know if she made it.
I did.
Yay!
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for sending me the link. The candied orange peels?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I use a vegetable peeler to peel really thin skin off, and just I boil them a little bit first, and then, or simmer them, strain them, and then cook some I got up at 4 o'clock this morning. So I'm talking very slowly. Anyway, so yeah, heat up some water and sugar, and then add the peels, and you just keep cooking it, stirring it gently once in a while until it crystallizes. But I also make limoncello with lemon peels. So that's another good use. Great use for peels.
Awesome, thank you. So I do have a little food dehydrator. And so sometimes when my oranges, after, I think, and we can definitely cook them down all the way, but if you didn't want to let them cook down all the way, you could also just finish them in a tray, in a low oven or food dehydrator. I have a food dehydrator, so I finish them that way because I want them to be really, really dry for long-term storage, because I had a lot of orange peels. And you can also, they'll stay well in the freezer as well. If they're a little moist, you can just keep them in the freezer for a long time. But I do have, we can also add the recipe for the candied peel to the recipe if that's helpful. And then last, I want to tell you, this is the cookie that I made that is closest to the Sandor website. And for this one, I did use 1 egg. So it's very similar to what Alison did, but I went one extra step and I used egg. And if you guys humor me, there was somebody who asked about gluten-free, and I love questions. So questions are like, just chase the information, because I'm like, but of course I have to test it. So I made, this is not a 2-month ferment, because somebody just popped the question, and I'm sorry, I really can't remember who is doing the rice ferment, and I hope who did that will talk to us right now. Let us know. I'm looking at the chat, I don't see it, but somebody had mentioned if we could do this with gluten-free flour. And I am just in love with this. So this, again, 1-to-1 ratio, I use sorghum, just 100% sorghum. And I use raw honey, like half honey and half molasses, kept the same ratio. And I used, for my liquid, I use actually squash, because I wanted to keep, if I'm going to keep gluten-free, I might as well just keep it vegan. So it's really delicious. I use the squash puree as a veggie egg, and I use about I started with 3 tablespoons. And let's see what else I add. I had half a cup of almond flour, and I did half a cup of candied peels. I did 2 teaspoons of spices and coarse salt. And then, so these are, Bread of Life bars made with sorghum, and they're just delicious. And, I don't know what I'm looking for, but I took this to a cookie exchange yesterday, and my friend said, I lived in Germany and I think they taste really like the real thing. And I was like, even with the sorghum? She goes, yeah, the spice mix is there. So the spice mix brought it forward. So if you have a friend who is gluten-free, you have this recipe as well if you would like to try. And I tried to bake them as cookies, but I don't think they were as successful as baked in a bar. It really turned out really nice. But even as a cookie, it's very soft. It's still delicious, but the bars just look so more impressive.
What a fun project.
Oh, yeah.
Sure. Annie, please speak up.
Loving this, by the way. So the nonette de Reims recipe that I messed up with seemed really similar to that. Used flour, wasn't gluten-free. But 2 things I wanted to say was that in that recipe, you just put an egg yolk into the honey flour mixture, and then use to save the white and whip it with sugar as a glaze at the end. So it's kind of a meringue glaze, which I think is, also interesting. And she also said that traditionally you could stamp out circles, or you could just bake it as a sheet and then cut it into diamonds, which seemed like really medieval and beautiful to have, like, this kind of like slanted, cross-sectioned slant, and then this little diamond cookies frosted with the meringue and sugar. Seemed really beautiful. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say. So, like, I think like there's so many ways to deconstruct the ingredients and then also add more ingredients. There's so much play, isn't there, with this basic recipe?
Yes, and I think, and I had just yesterday when I was trying to write the recipe, this is my last bit to say, I just wanted to leave you with this idea. And Amy and I talk about this all the time. Time is an ingredient. And often, things happen or may not happen or happen in different ways. And it's not because we don't have the ingredients, or it's just because of the time. And I think a lot of situations in our kitchen is about managing the ingredients, the dough. And it's like, okay, so, and you're talking about the cake. Well, life happened. I had to leave that cake, and it will happen. And so what do we do with that? And I just love this idea of this dough starts from the point of, don't worry about me. I'm okay. I'm sitting here waiting for you. So it just puts a smile on my face, because I keep thinking of we go to the store and we buy cake mix and, cookie mix. Why? Because it's a flour that's measured and ready for you when you want to make something. It's waiting for you. Well, this dough, that you can use your local flour, you can use honey, you can customize to, your dietary restrictions. It's waiting for us. And that's like such a gift. It sits there, and if you want to make something, you can just grab a little piece of dough and you can make a little cookie, and it just sits there, and it can sit there waiting for us. So it's just kind of exciting. And I have some other things that I've been playing with, and you get in a handout, like I made a drink out of the dough. I just put a little bit of dough into some hot milk, and I thicken it and made sort of like an eggnog drink. So that's on the handout, but I hope this is a little inspiration for everybody. And actually I would love to hear what other people are doing. Like what are you baking? Did anybody bake? And I would love people to unmute themselves and talk.
Yeah.
I think Amanda's got something to show us. She's baked some just now.
Oh, awesome.
And I think if you talk, Amanda, you'll be spotlighted.
Sure. Okay.
There
So
you
I've
are.
baked my first batch and I've cut them out into Christmas tree shapes. I have to do half of my batch without peel. The other half I've got just cooling in the fridge while these ones cool down that have peel and walnuts in them. My husband can't stand the taste of peel, but yeah, I've just added a little bit of butter like Alison. I haven't put any egg in it, some baking powder and baking soda, and they've turned out really well. They smell delicious. In my spice blend, I've also added black pepper, which I picked up that tip at it was a historical reenactment village that is German centered in our area. And I guess traditionally they add black pepper and it's really delicious.
They're beautiful. Thank you.
Absolutely. Are they I wanted to know the texture of them, Amanda. Do you have enough to spare that you could hold one up and show and break it for us? But I know if it's too precious, you can skip my curiosity.
Yeah, I could hold one up. I mean, I've got taste testers home. So let me just break one off. They seem very light. Let's see if I can do this way. They seem very light. Let's put that here.
Cookie camera.
Yeah.
Great.
So very light and airy texture, just like a traditional gingerbread that I'm used to. And I'll taste one. Yeah, they taste delicious. Not too sweet.
Wonderful.
Just perfect in my opinion.
Thank you.
Amanda, did you use wheat?
Yeah, I used regular wheat flour.
I had a question about that. Did you find that it was as tough to break the dough? I guess my question is more like, how did the honey hydrate the wheat? Because I didn't test wheat. So I was just wondering, was it very pliable and elastic? Or was it chunky like ours?
It was definitely, I was worried about it being too hard, but I did what was suggested and put it over just a simmering pot of water for a little bit, and it warmed up beautifully and everything rolled out really well. So
great, thank you.
Thank you. That's awesome. Ellie, do you want me to show the rest of my my rice spice bread now?
Yes, I'm sorry. I went on and on and on and on. You guys
No,
remember I told you to interrupt me. Don't let me go.
You didn't. It's a beautiful December day here, and I've got the Tuscan sun shining right in my face. I pulled the curtains across, but it's persistent, and I love that. So I'm kind of highlighted here. So what I wanted to show was the other thing that I did with the dough, which is I've been making a rye spice bread in my kitchen for years now with sourdough discard, and I absolutely love making it. I love the rye, and I love the fact that I make it not too sweet, and I love the fact that it uses sourdough and it just rises. And I read probably about 6 months ago that a rye spice bread was made in France traditionally and matured for months, and I remember getting very excited about it and trying to read and research, and then just coming across recipe after recipe in French, which I don't speak. I have enough trouble speaking Italian, let alone French. So I kind of stopped there and just carried on making my normal rye spice bread with the sourdough discard. And then when I saw Annie's post, this is what kind of pulled me in, because I thought, oh, maybe I could use that dough to make a rye spice bread with. So as well as doing my one with spelt and chestnut that I showed you in the cookies earlier on, which they are, I just want to show you these. They are, oh, okay. being enthusiastic. Bear with me a second. Okay, there we go. So those are my little gingerbread ones ready to go. To go in the oven in a minute. As well as doing that, I put another dough down, which was rye, whole grain rye, and then 4/5 honey and 1/5 molasses, because molasses is such a lovely flavour in a rye spice bread. So I decided to include that as well. And then I knew that I wanted to do something with sourdough, because before we made these cookies, I didn't have any baking powder in my kitchen, because I don't really like using baking powder. I naturally turn to sourdough. So I thought I really want to try something with this dough that raises it using a discard, not using any form of kind of baking powder or baking soda. And I wanted to make it more bready, because I remembered as a kid in England eating a gingerbread made by, I think it was made by Lyons, the company, Lyons, and it was treacly and sticky and bready. And I thought, I really want to try and make something that's kind of not as sweet as that, because my tastes have changed and I don't eat things that sweet, but something that had that kind of feel to it. So what I came up with, what I've ended up with, is I'll show you a cut slice of this. I hope you can see that all right. And this is squishy and moist. It's got raisins in it. And it's been baked in a sandwich tin. So it's part of a circle kind of sandwich tin. It's gingery, it's spicy. It's not too sweet because I didn't add any extra sugar or any extra honey or sweetener other than the fermented dough. I actually added extra flour, so it's less sweet than the dough is. And I just wanted to tell you before I talk through how I made this a little bit about the French rye spice bread. So in French, spice bread is called pain d'épices, épice meaning spice in French, and pan bread. And it was traditionally made in Rheims, which is interesting based on what Annie said, because her recipe that she worked on originally, that ended up being biscotti, has the Rheims in it. So it obviously comes from the same tradition in the same city. And in the 16th century in France, this spice bread was just all the rage, and the French court absolutely loved it, to the point where in 1571, the bakers of pain d'épices were given a royal charter. So they were an industry in and of themselves in Rheims. And they made it using rye originally. And interestingly, it had no ginger in it. So it had other spices in it, but it wasn't a gingerbread. And then they mix the dough up and they leave it in wooden troughs for months. And as far as I can tell from my research, there was no other leavening added at all. They just left it and it raised itself. Later on in the history, Dijon, the other city in France, took over the pain d'épices recipe. They had a more of an industrial way of making it, and they changed to wheat. But traditionally it was rye, and I much prefer rye. I don't use wheat in my kitchen. I use spelt and rye and a few other gluten-free and buckwheat sometimes. So I wanted to make it with rye. And there was one other bit of trivia that I found out, which I thought was quite interesting. In the Alsace region, which is kind of between France and Germany, there's a museum that is dedicated to pain d'épices. I've never been, but I think it would be fascinating to go to a museum dedicated to a rye cake. So moving on to my recipe, it really was an experimentation. It's just what Ellie was talking about. The dough kind of gives you the option to take it and use it in different ways. So I've made the cookies with it, with a spelt version, and then I've moved to thinking, oh, can I make a bread with it? And I'm going to talk you through kind of what I put in the dough, but I mixed it up earlier because I use my food processor and it's very loud and I didn't want to have it on the call. You could do it by hand and I'll explain how. I didn't soften my hard initial dough. Obviously, we talked about putting it over water. So you could soften it and do this by hand. I chose not to soften my dough, to break it into pieces and to put it in the food processor. You need quite a strong food processor to do it because, as you know, if you've made that dough, it's quite hard. So I've got my food processor here because I literally mixed it a little bit earlier. And I'm just going to change my camera here to make sure that I can see, that you can see what I've got here. Yes, you can. Okay, that's excellent. So the recipe is on the handout, which we'll make sure you get, so you don't have to worry about copying anything down. And what I've got in here is 250 grams of the fermented original dough, which was 50-50 rye, whole grain, and a sweetener, 4 parts honey, 1 part molasses. I've got 100 grams of sourdough discard, which was also whole grain rye. I've got 70 grams of whole grain rye flour. Then for my liquid, I used almond milk, which I made myself by just soaking almonds overnight, draining them and whizzing them up in a blender and then sieving. I get milk to put in this, and then I get what I call almond muff. That's what my son calls it, to have on breakfasts. That's what the liquid portion of this is. And then the spices in here are, this time, a teaspoon of cinnamon, some nutmeg, some cloves, some anise, some allspice berries, lots of ground ginger, more than I put in the cookies. And then I also put in here a tablespoon and a half of grated orange zest. That makes it a little bit more moist, which is good when it's baking, but also gives it that lovely flavour as well. And that's all literally been whizzed up. And my food processor jumped around a little bit as I did it, but it's all right. And I'm going to put in 60 grams of raisins. I did try. This is the 4th time I've done this. The first time was a little bit too dry. The second time was a little bit too wet. The third time was really quite good. And then no one in the house is complaining that there's a 4th time. So there's a 4th one to eat. I'm mixing in the raisins just as they are. The second time I did it, I soaked the raisins in some water kefir because I thought it would help keep it really moist, but it ended up being too moist. So I decided to go back to just the raisins from the packet. So I'm just mixing those in. And then I've got an 8-inch sandwich tin, which I've greased with lard and also put a liner in because I've had too many occasions with rye spice breads where it's stuck to the bottom of things. And if you've got such a lovely cake, it's so disheartening when it sticks to the bottom of something. So I'm literally, as you can see, it's sort of a fruit cake consistency, the way it's kind of coming out. And I'm just going to pile that all in. Again, this is just a blank canvas, really. I mean, you could add other flowers in if you wanted to. You could add various spices in. You could add candied peels in it. You could add the almonds in it. When I've, the years that I've been making rye spice bread, I've literally put in whatever I fancied each time, and it always comes out tasting really amazing. So when that's all in, all I'm going to do is level it off, and then I'm going to let it ferment because obviously this has got sourdough starter in it, and that's what's going to do the raising for us. And so what I will do, usually if there's space between the level of my dough and the top of this pan, I will cover it in something, sometimes cling film, and let it rise. If I think that the dough is going to come over the top of the level of this tin here, then I will use a fly screen and tent this, and then put damp tea towels over the top of that tent so the top of it doesn't dry out. And then I leave it somewhere warm to ferment. And in our house, my husband set us up a DIY proofing setup rather than paying hundreds of pounds for a proofer. It's a heating element and it's got a little switch on it. And I put it in my oven That's the space I use because I don't have any other space. And I can set it to a temperature that I want it to be. And so I will leave that in my DIY proofing box to ferment. And when it's 75% risen, I will put it in the oven at, again, 180, which I think Amy said was 356 Fahrenheit, 180 C. And then I bake it for 35 to 40 minutes. And it's kind of a judgment when it's done. The temperature was 98 last night when I made the last one, when I made this one here. And as you can see, it's just, it's so moist, so delicious, not too sweet. If you want it sweeter, you can add in some extra molasses or honey. You could ice it, dust cinnamon on the top, even put some alcohol inside it as well. It's really, really beautiful. And I'm so pleased that Annie posted the dough originally, because it kind of been my mission for a little while to get a spice bread that was more authentic, and I feel like I'm getting there with this. And so it's kind of made my Christmas, this recipe. Thank you. Any questions? I'm quite happy to take them. I know that Anne-Marie's been baking. She's made some cookies and baked them. So perhaps we could go to her next to see her cookies. Ellie, what do you think?
Yes, that would be great. We can ask Amy if we can pin Anne-Marie.
Thanks.
We're putting you on the spot, Anne-Marie.
Anne-Marie, if you speak, you will self-pin.
So I didn't do anything very exciting with my dough. This is my first attempt. When I saw Annie posted that, I immediately took the molasses and honey out of the cupboard and put it on the counter where it sat for a month. And I finally made the dough in November. So this is my first attempt. So I baked that this morning, and all I added was a little bit of butter and a pinch of baking soda. I made a pretty small batch and sprinkled a little bit of sugar on top. Anyway, like you said, Alison, they're very, very crispy. But I'll dip them in my tea, and then hopefully they'll soften a little bit. And then I think I'll let this ferment a little longer. So this is just flour, it's darker molasses and honey. Maybe I'll add an egg to this one and some spices. So I'll leave that one for another day. But yeah, this is when I saw Annie posted it, I was so excited. Had to try it. So yeah, and I'm happy. I tasted when it was good. They expanded more than I thought.
Hey, that's a little mouse. You've got to do a face on that one. It's a little mouse.
Yeah, yeah. So I didn't space them quite enough on my baking sheet. I also should have greased it a little bit. They stuck a little bit. So yeah, so that's my attempt.
Wonderful, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you for this. This was great.
Sharon, yes, please share. If you just speak up, you will launch yourself into the center of attention.
Can you see me okay?
Yes, wonderful.
Okay, so I become friends with Ellie over Instagram in the last year, and she's wonderful, as we all know. Hi, Ellie. Anyway, so I think a day before she informed me about this Zoom and what you were all doing, I had recently purchased Classic German Baking by Louisa Weiss. And because my background is German, I've all of a sudden got this desire to, start eating some cookies that I had growing up. And so I made her Lebkuchen dough. I think it was probably 5 to 6 weeks ago, and it does includes everything, includes all the spices, all the, the eggs, everything. So, I was taking a chance because I've never had dough sit with eggs in it, but, she reassured me in the cookbook that all the honey and the sugar destroys, bacteria doesn't have a chance to grow because of the honey and the sugar. But still coming up to the day of baking, I was still really nervous. And I thought, same sort of thing as Ellie's kids. I might die eating this cookie, but what a way to go, right? By eating a cookie. I love cookies. Anyway, so yesterday I baked with one of my grandsons, and I'm not sure how to turn this around. Oh, here we go. I'll show you. That's just one layer. Made lots of cookies. Now, lead cooking, from what I remember, is supposed to be like softer and lighter than what they turn. This is, here we go. It's more like a snap cookie. But I did learn some things, and I think when I pulled the bowl out of my cupboard, I noticed that there was a hard coating, kind of very dry on top. Anywhere I read said just, or maybe it was, I don't know, I can't remember who said it, but to put a plate on top to let it have a bit of air. But I think I got to do something about that. Maybe one of you can suggest something for next time, how to actually cover the dough and keep it from getting dried out. So I think that's why it was dried out, but it was super easy to roll out. The flavor is a new flavor for me, even though I, work with all those, spices on a regular basis. I'm really, really happy with how it turned out. So there we go.
They're
Sharon.
beautiful, Sharon. Thank
Oh.
you. Really, really lovely.
Yes,
Thank you.
they are.
What I wanted
Thank
to
you.
say was that I think they will probably get softer if you leave them in that tin for a few days. They will get softer,
Right.
because the reading that I did on Lev Cooken is that if you leave them in a closed container or you put them in the fridge, that's what's happened to mine. It started as a really hard snap, but
Yep.
if you leave it, it will get softer and softer.
Okay. Now I did read also to put like a quarter of an apple in there to do that as well. Do you know anything about that?
No, I don't.
I think Annie
And-
just typed that
Do you
in.
know about that one?
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Well,
there you go.
I'm super, I'm
Annie does.
glad that I
Thank
did
you,
it.
Annie.
And like Ellie's kids, I didn't die, and neither did my grandson. So
But
I'm
this
super
is-
happy.
This is really great. I'm so glad we had the conversation about the raw eggs, because
Yes.
we actually dove in really deep. Like, I went to the CDC. I actually found, more people mixing these kinds of doughs, and I was sending Sharon, Instagram videos of the author of the book. And I think, again, it's just informing ourselves. I think there's so much of personal ways of doing things that were passed down from watching friends doing things, having these food conversations, and so much gets lost, and we just feel this anxiety about, even when we read the recipe book, we're like, are you sure this is gonna work? Right?
Yes. And I live in Ontario, Canada. I mean, it's cold here, but we had this very warm snap in November of 3 days. And I was really worried that it was in a closet on an outside wall, but I was worried that maybe the temperature would be too warm. But Louisa on Instagram, I asked her, and she said, temperature, don't worry about it. It's all about the honey and the sugar.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And also, just another note is, I use raw honey, which I'm not sure if that is, an addition safety. So if people did not use raw honey, if they want to chime in, did things work out for them? I would love to hear that as well. They just use.
Yeah, I used raw honey as well.
Okay. Because I think the Sandor website it was not specific about raw honey. I just assumed that we would encourage the recipe by using raw honey, but I wasn't.
I think that traditionally it would have been raw honey, because when it was first made, pasteurization wouldn't have been around. So there just would have only been raw honey.
Right. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.
Does anybody else want to share their cookies?
I just got a batch out of the oven.
Oh, goody, Jen.
Hold on.
Can't wait to see them.
All right, so I did the, just the fermented gingerbread. I had 600 grams, so 300 grams of Sonora wheat, and then 300 grams of unsulfured molasses. And then I added 30 grams of butter and a tablespoon and a half of the spice. And I cooked them at 350 for about 8 minutes. I definitely would put an egg and maybe some leavener in it because, hold on. It just tastes like, you know, flour and butter, but very soft.
Looks great.
Yeah, nice spice to it. So these came out very soft.
Wonderful.
But I like them either soft or crispy, so I'm easy to please.
And remind me what, oh, you use Sonora, right?
Sonora wheat, yeah.
Cool.
And molasses.
Awesome. Thanks, Jen.
You're welcome.
Annie, you wanted to say something about honey?
I mean, I don't know if this is true, so don't quote me, but you know how fermenters always say don't put honey in things because it prevents the activity of other bacteria. So it's possible that the honey is a kind of preservative and prevents horrible egg things from happening. Don't quote me. But and also sugar, you know, if you were going to use sugar, maybe the acidity of sugar also creates a kind of antibacterial environment. Like, I don't know. It's just a thought of why, like, preserving in, or think of like, you know, people's honey ferments. I mean, and an egg, we have a lot of fear around eggs, but a lot of that is industrial eggs.
Yeah.
But nobody quote me because I also have all these fears too.
Yeah.
I want to chime in about the eggs. Like a basic recipe for curing egg yolks is a mixture of exact percentage of salt and sugar. So if you want to cure your egg yolks, you would put the same amounts of salt and sugar and you bury your egg yolks. And in a few days, you have a cured egg yolks that you can, you know, transport, eat safely. So again, it's just a stepping into different lessons around food and eggs and you know, and conquering the little fear one day at a time.
Oh, good. Go ahead, Annie.
I know if people want to go. I have this desire to show you my mustache cookie cutters. They're so fun. I didn't do it this year because but I didn't. But usually I make, like, if I'm making cookies to sell, I'll use these because it's really fun for the kids to go around, you know, play with your food kind of thing.
Oh, that's great.
I thought I'd show
Okay,
you all.
so on that note, I have to share this to Annie too, because this, Annie, I got this because of you. Years ago, you posted a hand cutter. And of course, I'm in a secondhand store and I saw this and I was like, I must have this. So to lots of friends sharing lots of hands.
Oh yeah, I love that.
I just fell in love with this. So on a note of cookie cutters, there we go.
Yeah.
There was a question about substitutes for honey that are not sugar. Any thoughts on that?
I think when I did it a few years ago, I used, I mixed maybe, I can't remember, the blackstrap molasses or treacle or, and the, you know, blackstrap molasses has that delicious bitterness, but makes everything black when you cook it, really dark. Oh yeah, because honey's not vegan. So that would, you know, limit who could eat your cookies.
Yeah, and people are putting in the chat agave syrup, and also I thought you could use brown rice syrup.
Or sorghum syrup, isn't
sorghum
I've
syrup?
never had that, but people
maple
love that.
syrup. Yes, Allie.
Yes.
What an omission to not think of that.
Yes.
Date syrup, Jen is suggesting. Yeah.
I want also to suggest something. These cookies, yes, it's the idea of fermenting something for 2 or 3 months. But really, the ratio of sweetener to flour and just the way of approaching the recipe is worth it. Even just mixing it and just let it sit in your fridge for a day or so. So even if you use these alternative sweeteners, like if you use maple syrup, just let it sit. If you're a little afraid of letting it sit out, just start by, mixing it, let it sit in your fridge. And then what I did with my experiments, I have a little container like this, and I put a little bit of dough and I set in my counter and I watch while the other one is in the fridge. And that helps me build a little bit of courage because I get to watch this one. So I'm not wasting ingredients because that's a big thing for me. Like I just don't want to toss, 800 grams of flour and honey. But just if I just mix a tiny little portion and let it ferment in my counter, and then I get to watch and observe what it's doing. And so if you mix your maple syrup of your pomegranate, as somebody wrote, if it goes horrible and it was just a little test, and then you learn from it and you don't feel so bad.
Right.
And report back, let us know, because we would love to know.
Yeah, I'd like to say, if you bake up things over the next few days, do share your pictures with us, send them to us, tag us, send them by email to us or DM. I'm at ancestral_kitchen on IG. And Ellie, what's your handle on IG?
It's just my name, Ellie Markovitch, or you can
Markovitch.
hashtag story cooking.
Because I would love to see baked up gingerbread and anyone who's done the spice bread and how everyone's interpreting them individually. That would be just wonderful, because it's been such a wonderful event. Thank you so much, Annie, for kicking this off and kind of sparking something in both of us, and Anne-Marie for coming in as well. It's been really cool. Thank you all.
Well, I feel like the discussion I remember my son said to me about Instagram, he said, like, Mom, there are people like you out there, because we're all like a little bit, I don't know, I feel like alone, kind of. I don't have friends around me who are interested in food in the same way that I am. So kind of Instagram community actually matters to me. It's who I talk to about food. So it's really nice from that point of view.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, everybody. If there are any final questions, anything you'd like to add, and if you don't want, if you think of it later, of course, please reach out to us.
Jen asks what we're going to do next time. Not sure. Not sure.
No, next time we meet, not later. I think we should do this more often.
I know, it's wonderful. Wonderful to see everybody, and thank you, everyone.
Well, and
thank
Amy,
you for
and I just have to say, last and not least, Amy, because she was the backbone behind this whole thing. She set up the event, she ran the tech, and until yesterday at 11 o'clock at night, I was like, all right, so I don't know. And Amy's like, I got you. And she always does. So thank you, Amy.
Well,
thank you.
We're just sisters, Ellie, so that's good.
Well, we're saying goodbye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, and have a fabulous festive period. Enjoy the ginger cookies.
We sure will. I'm so excited now. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Bye. Bye.
There, I just turned off the recording, and that was really wonderful.